Welcome to Follow the Medical Record, where healthcare experts give insights into the increasing importance of following a patient's medical record through the health ecosystem with compliance, privacy, security, and efficiency front and center. This podcast is brought to you by MRO and hosted by Don Hardwick, Senior Vice President of Client Relations at MRO. Don has been in the health information management industry for over 40 years and has extensive knowledge of how medical records make their way through the healthcare ecosystem. At MRO, Don is responsible for strategic client engagement programs and overall client satisfaction. To hear from all of MRO's industry experts, be sure to visit mrocorp.com for additional content and to sign up for our monthly e-newsletter. Over to you, Don.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for listening to Follow the Medical Record. I'm your host, Don Hardwick. You can learn a little bit more about me and my background on MRO's website at mrocorp.com and can connect with us on LinkedIn. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter at MROCORP. I am truly excited today to have Elliott Noble-Holt on the show. Elliott is the founder of a company called MediCopy, headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, and is most recently part of the MRO family of services. Elliott's a Nashville native and has been devoted to his professional career most of the past 25 years to the advancement of health information management to inspire and improve patient care by providing better health information exchange. So welcome, Elliott.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate you having me.
I am so excited. Elliott, we're going to talk today a little bit about entrepreneurship. And I'm always very intrigued by what motivates a person to get out of the mainstream of having a job and take that leap to start their own business. So tell me, if you would, a little bit about what motivated you. And then we're gonna go into a whole bunch of questions here.
Absolutely. So I actually come from an entrepreneurial household. And so both of my grandparents were business owners. One owned a gas station back in the 60s and 70s. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. Him and my father both ran a printing company, local printing company here in Nashville that printed all sorts of things, including business cards, appointment cards, charge tickets for healthcare facilities, surgery tickets, all sorts of things. So I was around that at a very young age, 4 and 5 years old. And then my mother, she worked at an orthopedic practice here in Nashville for 30 years before she passed away. And so I grew up in that environment too. So I would go to work with her. She was a workaholic, nights, weekends, etc. And so I was around the healthcare part of it. My uncles were entrepreneurs, and so I always had that in my blood. My father and grandfather, back to the printing company, we used to print this job called the Bible class. And so they would print the Bible class. We would have to cut it, fold it, and then as children, me, my brother, and sister would collate this job, and then at the end, someone would staple it. They would get bound up and then sent to Africa to spread the word. But I'm doing this at 6 and 7 years old up until my parents divorced at 12. So it's work and work ethic has always been instilled in me. After my parents had divorced, my mother would come pick me up from junior high and high school. She lived about an hour away from Nashville. And so I would go hang out in the kitchen at her job doing my homework and just trying to, get through my homework and get my life together. And she was executive administrative assistant at this orthopedic practice, and she would stay till 7 or 8 o'clock at night because that's how she was. And so I would go into the medical records department just for fun and help pull charts and file charts. And this was, back in the day when everyone was still on paper. They ended up putting me on payroll in 1993 for $4.25 an hour, which was minimum wage. And so I ended up working there through high school. And then the senior year of my high school, my father passed away, and I was barely able to get out of high school because of that. But I did. And I ended up going to a local community college because I was attracted to business management and office administration. I wanted to be an office manager of a physician's practice or something like that. But I ended up going to college for 10 days before I dropped out.
That's funny.
Yeah, it just wasn't for me. And I hate saying that, but it's the truth. It's my truth. And so I have a 19-year-old that's not in college right now, and I sometimes want to choke her because of it. But then there's, she has this example of someone that didn't take that path. But I ended up going back to work at the orthopedic practice and working there till I was 21, which is when I started MediCopy. And the reason I started them was because we were using a vendor, and the vendor wasn't, the turnaround time wasn't great. The quality of the images they were, scanning or copying at the time, weren't great. I would get, complaints from the attorneys, insurance companies, the state, other practices saying, hey, we need these records because there's a court case and we're, due in court tomorrow. Or the patient's having surgery in the morning and we need these records now. And they couldn't wait for that vendor to get the records. And so I would find myself re-pulling the chart, having to do it myself, get the records ready for maybe the paralegal to come pick up for the court case, or fax the records myself over to the surgery center so that the patient can have the records. And so because I was having to touch it twice, and I'm a firm believer when you have something, you touch it once, I ended up going to my office manager saying, listen, we continue to get complaints. I do, and she did too. What are your thoughts about me doing this nights and weekends? I'll clock out. I won't be on, you guys' time. I'll go buy my own equipment. But now we'll know that it's done right. So we ended up, she said, yes, go do it. She believed in me, and I was very thankful for that, for me being 21 years old. But I've been working there for 6 years, and so she knew my work ethic and how I operated, how I like things done a certain way. And so we ended up, my mother took me to Best Buy to buy me a Hewlett-Packard copy machine. And back then, if you signed up for AOL, they gave you a $500 gift card. And we used that gift card to buy this Hewlett-Packard copy machine. And I started copying medical records for that orthopedic practice 22 years ago. And they're still a client to this day.
That is so interesting. You started off in the right direction as an entrepreneur because of your family. And it doesn't seem like that was a decision that you left another job or another business. You kind of migrated right into the whole concept. This whole industry of release of information actually started very similar to that.
That's right.
So you have mimicked or mirrored sort of that pathway in your career.
Absolutely.
I love that. So tell me about MediCopy. You started MediCopy at 21, I guess it was. And how is that transformed through the years? You had one client.
Sure.
And now you've got lots of clients spread out across the country. So tell me a little bit how that transformation occurred and some of the pain of that transformation.
Yeah, it's so funny. People love to hear about the pain part and struggles, and I always steer away from it. But obviously, there's pain and struggles that come along with starting a company and maintaining it. But when I started, I had one client, but because I'd been in this medical plaza for 6 years, I knew other office managers or what have you. And so I was able to go to them and ask them, like, hey, are you using a vendor? And if not, we're a free service and we do this and we do that. And we're able to pick up clients pretty fast. And so I think maybe in the first 90 days, I had 3 or 4 clients in this medical plaza and was able to quit my full-time job and really focus on, growing my client base. I ended up going to smaller communities here in Tennessee and that were picked up by larger vendors. And so, Pulaski, Columbia, Franklin, Tennessee, all sorts of places. I worked out of my diner room for the first 2 years with a $99 Brother fax machine and a Dell laptop that my 2 good friends financed for me. I was paying $23 a month for this Dell laptop to help invoice these records. Yeah, that was a struggle, from my perspective. We ended up going to a 300 square foot office that fit 2 other people that I hired, and then moved into the Gulch. We were there for 10 years in this little small space, and we grew into that. And now we're in this beautiful campus off of just up behind Centennial Park here in Nashville on the One City campus. The evolution of the medical records, I remember when we started going electronic, and I remember my mother saying, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to have a business now because you're not copying medical records. And I immediately started to pivot, and me and another employee started focusing on electronic medical records and remoting in and figuring out how to have access, make sure that it's secure connection, et cetera. And so right then I knew that we were going to have kind of cater to 3 different audiences. One that's all paper still. This was in 2008 or 9. All paper, hybrid, paper and electronic, because people didn't want to put their old archive records into the EMR. They couldn't afford it. They didn't know what that meant even. And then people who started their practice back then that were full electronic or had already converted. And so we made it a point to be able to always be able to serve those 3 clients. And that was the best thing we could have ever done. Because of the money that Obama put out there for physicians' offices and hospitals to go electronic, that was extremely beneficial to us. And we were able to expand our footprint, nationwide. And now we have over 4,000 physicians' offices and hospitals that we contract with.
That is super. So we've always heard that because of the electronic record is that release of information is going to go away.
All right.
It's going to be a push of a button, and it's, how complicated can this business be? You get a request for it, you pull it out, and you send it.
Right.
What do you think about that concept?
Probably minimal truth to that for numerous reasons. One is that we're still humans, and so we still have to, we make mistakes. And so if a lab is sent in and accidentally scanned into a patient's chart, you have to have some type of quality check behind that. There has to be that part. So that's one. There's definitely not a push of a button. There's no EMR system that I've worked with where you just literally push a button. It's important to have someone checking the authorization, making sure the records that are requested are the ones that are being sent. There's multiple things that go along with that to make sure that one record gets out. It's funny to me that people think that.
Tell me a little bit about the evolution of MediCopy. You're primarily in the physician market.
Correct.
That's where you started. That's where you were. Your focus was for several years, and then you kind of migrated into forms management. Tell me a little bit about the forms management piece of this.
Sure. So 2 things with that. One, because my background, I saw the pain points of physicians' offices. I stayed there just because I knew how to relate to office managers or decision makers. I understood they wear multiple hats. And so it was a little bit easier to, sell to them just because we could relate and I understood and I had the solution. But with that, when I worked at the orthopedic practice, these forms would come in, FMLA, short-term, long-term disability forms, and I would paperclip them on top of the chart. Once again, everything was still paper. And then I would put them on the nurse's station or the doctor's desk, and they would sit there until they had an off day or a half day or the physician wasn't in surgery or et cetera. And then the patient would call, the insurance company would call and ask about the status update. Was this form completed? And these patients are waiting on checks, house notes to be paid, loans, to be deferred, et cetera. And so I went to my office manager at the time and said, listen, this seems to be a simple process, but one that's time consuming. It's still detail oriented because you have to make sure that you're looking at the correct diagnosis code in case the patient's been seen for multiple reasons, or the CPT code or the date of the onset of symptoms, et cetera. And so they allowed me to start doing those forms. And so I saw an opportunity to maybe have an add-on service besides the release of health information and medical records, and add the FMLA short-term and long-term disability as a service. Now, the front desk receptionist can easily take take the disability form from the patient, scan it in, and task it to MediCopy, and we do the rest. They don't have to worry about payment. They don't have to worry about completing it. They don't have to worry about the communication with the patient or the insurance company.
I will tell you, this is so valuable for any of our listeners that have ever had the thought of being in business for themselves. I'm not sure whether this would be the avenue for them, but it is, in essence, you found a pain point in a business that you were familiar with, and then sought to ease that pain point for, in this case, physician practices. And you found two pain points in their business. Now, on those documents for forms management, are they primarily focused on any particular type of practice, or is it general for any practice?
It's pretty general. Obviously, with orthopedic, neuro, OBGYN, there's more forms because of the specialty, but it's pretty general.
Okay. It's a valuable discussion here for people that I think have ever had the thought of being in business for themselves. And a lot of people do, but they're afraid to take that step. But if you've got an idea and you can solve a issue for a organization, whatever that organization is, most of the time somebody can make a business out of it.
Absolutely. On that note, I'll say this just for just an add-on. I'm very thankful to that office manager. One, she had a true open door policy. Most employers say they have an open door policy, but they're usually either too busy to stop and listen. But she did. And so I take that to heart, because here at MediCopy, I do the same thing. I want to be sure that my door is constantly open, because somebody may walk in here with a wonderful idea, not just for MediCopy, but for themselves. And because one of our core values is to continue to grow personally and professionally, if that means that that person has an opportunity to do that, we want to make sure that we allow that.
Elliot, any advice for an entrepreneur or a would-be entrepreneur that you could give them that may help them bridge that transition from job to being their own boss?
I will not give advice, but I'll share experience.
There you go.
And for me, it's been 22 years. And so I can easily say, oh yeah, I got these clients and left. For the first 2 or 3 years when I was working out of my dining room, I also worked at a cookie store, making $10 an hour just to make ends meet, because I wanted to make sure that I had, income. It's not always easy. I know social media makes things look easy. It isn't always easy, but I think having faith and belief in yourself is really important. I think taking chances and on yourself is important. I think manifesting who you're meant to be, whatever that means to you, is important. But for me, I wanted to take a chance on myself. I still do this 22 years later. Dream big and go get it. I think that from my perspective, I have in my mind, there's this list of things that I want and the action items to get them. A lot of us have this idea of when we grow up, we want to have a house, a great career, and retire, do this, that, and the other. And those things are all attainable. But how fast you get there and the magnitude of it depends on the actions that you're going to put behind it.
Elliot provided me a nice tour of his office this morning, and I really appreciate that, Elliot. And one of the things that I noticed is your employees here seem to be very happy people, okay? I'll never forget something that someone told me, and I think it's an example of your management style here, at least what I'm seeing so far. And the person said, love people, use things, don't confuse the two. And I will tell you, your office looks like that statement.
Well, I appreciate that.
Very happy.
I really appreciate that.
Employees in here. I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience a little bit also about your book and where to get it.
Sure. So, I mean, if you look at the book, it's a little intimidating because I'm on the cover, and it's called Bald Bearded Boss, but it's about manifesting who you're meant to be. It tells a little bit about my story of how I got there, at least, you know, what my thoughts of success are. But there's other things that we, go through. You talked about struggles earlier, and I highlighted that I went through my parents' divorce. My father passing away. My mother passed away 6 years ago. And these are real things that happen to real people, and you have to have support, both personally and professionally. My director of operations allowed me to really be absent from this business for 6 months so that I can go be with my mother before she passed away. And you have to love that person for that. And so there's a lot of things that when you talk about love, and you make sure, I'm very passionate when it comes to things. I'm surprised I have not cried yet on this podcast because I'm an emotional person. But and I love telling that story just about how I've got to where I'm at. But it takes us all. I'm not one person. Everyone here has helped me get to where I am and to where this company is. And they're all owed that credit.
And where can they see or find this book?
Yeah, listen, they can go to Target.com. It's on Amazon. It was an Amazon bestseller back in November. Barnes & Noble, anywhere you can buy a book. It's also on Audible. You get to hear my voice reading it, which is hilarious. But no, it's a great book, and probably not what most people think it's going to be.
Very good. So I'll just say it one more time. It is Bald Bearded Boss, Manifesting Who You're Meant to Be. I love it. So Elliot, thanks a lot for your time. I really do appreciate you being on the show. It's been interesting, and I'm sure our audience will find it interesting as well.
Listen, I appreciate you having me.
So I'll close today. For more insights on a patient's medical record through the health ecosystem, visit the show's page at MROCORP.com and be sure to explore additional resources and thought leadership. You can also check out the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. And finally, be sure to connect with us on Twitter at MROCORP. Until we talk again, I'm Don Hardwick, your host. Good day.